Adeline Hart sat quietly in the back row of the university lecture hall, notebook open, pen ready. She always arrived early, kept to herself, and never raised her hand. Her hair was usually tied in a simple braid, and her clothes were plain, nothing that drew attention. In a sea of talkative, eager undergrads, she was nearly invisible. Except to Professor Barlow. Barlow was brilliant, no doubt. He had published papers in advanced calculus, spoken at conferences, and was respected in academic circles. But he had one flaw. He looked down on anyone who didn't match his loud confidence, especially quiet students, especially ones like Adeline. That morning, Barlow strolled in late, holding a coffee and tossing a glance around the room. "Today," he said with a smirk, "we'll test your actual brain power." He drew a massive equation on the board, a complicated calculus puzzle involving triple integrals, limits, and a non-standard approach. The class fell silent. Even the sharpest students blinked in confusion. Barlow turned around. "Let's have someone unexpected try it." His eyes scanned the room and landed deliberately on Adeline. "You in the back. Miss Hart, isn't it?" he said, already smiling smugly. "Why don't you give this a shot?" Adeline froze. She hadn't raised her hand. He was putting her on the spot, and he knew it. The class turned to look at her. A few chuckled under their breath. Adeline cleared her throat. "I'd prefer not to come to the board, Professor, but I can solve it here." Barlow arched a brow. "Suit yourself, but don't take too long. This isn't high school algebra." The class giggled. Adeline lowered her eyes and started writing. Her pencil glided over the paper with calm precision. She didn't glance up, didn't flinch at the whispers or snickers. She had seen this kind of problem before, not in class, but in her late-night reading. She adored calculus the way some people adored poetry. Every equation had rhythm, structure, beauty. As the minutes passed, her mind raced through each step. Barlow, meanwhile, walked around the room, pretending to offer help to others, but glancing back often. He expected her to give up, but she didn't. In fact, she was ahead. Behind her, two students nudged each other. "Is she actually solving it?" "I think she is." Barlow walked back to the front, arms crossed. 10 more minutes, he said. Adeline didn't even lift her head, and when the timer buzzed, she calmly put down her pencil. Barlow approached her desk and raised a brow. "Let's see what you came up with, genius." He took the page with a smirk. But the moment his eyes skimmed the first few lines, the smirk faded. His eyes darted across the paper faster. His lips pressed together. Something wasn't right. Something about her steps, too clean, too elegant, too advanced. Still, pride wouldn't let him admit anything out loud. "We'll review these tomorrow," he said gruffly, walking away. Class dismissed. Adeline quietly packed her things unnoticed again. But tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, the lecture hall buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread quickly. Professor Barlow had called out the quiet girl, and she'd handed in a solution to one of the most complicated calculus problems the class had ever seen. Some thought she'd cracked it, others thought she got lucky. But no one knew for sure, except Barlow. Adeline sat in the same seat, back row, eyes forward. She looked calm, but her fingers nervously twirled her pencil. She wasn't worried about the math. She was worried about what would come next. Attention wasn't something she sought. For years, she had hidden her brilliance behind silence and modesty. Her love for numbers was personal, sacred even. Professor Barlow walked in with a folder under his arm, unusually quiet. No coffee, no grand entrance. The class grew silent. He stood at the front, pulled out a familiar piece of paper, and without looking up, spoke. "Before we begin, I owe someone an apology." A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. He looked directly at Adeline. "Miss Hart," he said, "your solution to yesterday's problem wasn't just correct, it was elegant. You not only solved it using an advanced method we haven't even covered yet, but you also simplified parts in a way that, frankly, I wouldn't have thought of." The room went completely silent. Barlow continued, his tone softer now. "Your work shows a mastery of multivariable calculus that most graduate students would struggle with. I was wrong to doubt you. Adeline blinked, stunned. The same professor who mocked her yesterday was now praising her in front of everyone. The students looked at her in a new light. A few mouthed, "Wow." One of the boys who used to joke about her clothes looked genuinely embarrassed. Barlow gestured for her to come to the front. "Would you mind explaining your method to the class?" She hesitated. Her instinct was to say no, but something inside her shifted. For the first time, she wanted to be seen, not for how she looked or how quietly she spoke, but for what she could do. She stood up and walked down the aisle. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the stunned silence. At the board, she took the marker and, with steady hands, rewrote the equation. "Instead of approaching the outer integral first," she said gently, "I used Fubini's theorem to rearrange the order of integration. That made the innermost limit easier to handle, and it revealed a symmetry in the function that simplified the entire expression." Barlow nodded slowly, clearly impressed. As she spoke, students leaned forward, genuinely engaged. One of the top students in class was frantically taking notes. When she finished, the room broke into applause. Adeline flushed, smiled shyly, and returned to her seat. After class, students who had never noticed her before came over to introduce themselves, ask questions, or just say, "That was amazing." Even Barlow stopped her on the way out. "I underestimated you," he said. "Don't let quietness hide your genius, Ms. Hart." She smiled politely. "Sometimes it helps me think better." He chuckled and nodded. That evening, Adeline sat at her small desk in her dorm, notebook open, light pouring over the pages. She was back in her world of numbers and logic, but this time she wasn't hiding. She had nothing left to prove. They all knew now.